So we're not. We have to go. I'm just skipping through things we have already done. So remember what I told you, that the disciples, when they're listening to this, they're asking Jesus, when will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? In other words, not the end of the world, like the end of the planet. They weren't thinking of that. They were thinking of the end of the age, and the beginning of the age when he was going to set up his kingdom. That's what they were thinking. They did not know anything about the church, even though they were going to be the apostles of the church. At this time, they did not understand it, okay? They didn't understand any of that until after Pentecost. So this is about Israel, and it's about the tribulation period, okay? That's what Matthew 24 and 25 is about. Now, let's remember last week we talked about the horsemen of the apocalypse, and how that is the start of what Jesus talked about here in Matthew 24, and it's also the start of Revelation. I don't have time to go back through all of it, but I'm just kind of doing a brief review in case and I can never remember everybody who's here. All I know is that I was here last week. Okay, I can't remember anybody else. But there's always different people coming and going. But just so you know, Jesus says here, he says, the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So that's what they asked him, right? They said, when will be the end? And he's talking about the end of the tribulation, okay? Notice he said the gospel of the kingdom, because in the tribulation period, that's what they'll be preaching, which is the same thing that he preached when he was here on the earth. But we don't really talk about that. We talk about the gospel of salvation by grace through faith. Now, they're saved by grace through faith, but the kingdom meaning they're going to be warning people the kingdom is coming. The king is coming. That's what they'll be preaching in the tribulation, because he will be coming back to set up the kingdom. So that's why he's using that phrase there. And then we talked about this verse, and then we got into this discussion about the Antichrist. And that's where we stopped last week. He says, you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. Whosoever readeth, let him understand. And remember, I told you that verse is also here in Mark. It's almost the same words. And it is from Daniel. And those of you that were here when we went through Daniel, we talked about this, and it's here in Daniel chapter 9. And so last week y'all were asking me about the Antichrist and if it would be possible to know who he was. We really can't know who he was, but we can know some of the things he's going to do, okay? And then by knowing what he's going to do, we might can kind of say, well, maybe he'll come from here. I told you that I'm thinking he's coming from Europe, and so, but I didn't tell you why. So here I'll try to explain to you why. So in Daniel, he says, the people of the prince that shall come, that would be the Romans, we're going to destroy the city of Jerusalem and the sanctuary, that's the temple. Now that happened in the past, right? 70 AD. The people that came, the Romans, destroyed the temple, the city. They did all that in 70 AD. Now, Rome itself was never conquered as a nation. That's the key, because all those other nations were conquered, but Rome, we're all here. the, the money is there. So Rome was not conquered. It just kind of fell from within, okay? It fell from corruption. So it's going to come back alive, okay? It's going to be revived. And a lot of it is being revived now through what we call the European Union. But when the Roman Empire is revived, This will be the final Gentile power that was in Nebuchadnezzar's image. So between Daniel verse 26 and in verse 27 in Daniel 9 is the entire church age. Okay? Between those two verses is over 2,000 years. Because when we come here to verse 27, this he is not the same he in verse 26. This he, that's the Antichrist. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. You see the word many? So this covenant is not just with Israel, but Israel is going to be part of the mix. And remember, the week we talked about was years, right? A week is 7 days, but this, I called it a heptad. Remember, I told you it was 7 years, not 7 days. So for 1 week of years, in other words, for one period of 7 years, is this covenant. And in the middle, in other words, at 3.5 years, he, the Antichrist, what's he going to do? This is the exact thing Jesus is talking about. He shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. And that's, you see the word desolate is there, and that's what Jesus said, the abomination of desolation, right? So if there's going to be a sacrifice, then what will we have to have? We have to have the temple again, right? And there's not one right now. So it has to be built before this part can happen. And before the Antichrist can do this, there has to be a temple. So remember that Daniel saw these kingdoms. He saw Babylon. Well, actually, Nebuchadnezzar saw it first, and then Daniel saw it. Babylon, Medes and the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans. And the Romans, remember, they weren't conquered. They just kind of fell from corruption. So they'll be revived as the final kingdom.
Now, will they be referred to as like the Roman Empire, or is it just a different name, but we know that this is like a symbolism?
I don't know if it'll be referred to that way, but here is where the Roman Empire was. And this today, at least this part, not this part, but this part is basically the European Union, okay? I think I had a slide in here. I might not have pulled it in. I remembered all these slides were in Daniel, so I had to go get them from Daniel and transport them into this PowerPoint. So I had one of the EU, but I don't think it's in here. Only when this part of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, if you remember the dream, he said he saw this image, and at the end he saw a stone cut without hands that hit the image at the foot and destroyed it. That is when the Gentile kingdoms, from Babylon all the way down to the Antichrist, that is when they'll finally be destroyed. And what is this stone cut without hands? This is a supernatural destruction by Jesus Christ. That has never happened. Okay? So when the Roman Empire kind of died from within, they were not destroyed supernaturally by Jesus Christ. That is going to happen at the end of the millennium, at the Battle of Armageddon, when he will destroy them with one word. So that has never happened yet. So these prophecies are not fulfilled yet, is what I'm trying to get you to see. So when Jesus is talking about all this, okay, and we have mentioned it before, but see, the reason I'm telling you this so much is because a lot of people take this and they say, oh, these are the signs before the rapture. And if you believe that, then you're going to get everything all mixed up, okay? Then you'll be believing in replacement theology, and then you'll be hating Israel, and then you'll be hating the Jewish people, and it's like a domino effect if you get it mixed up. So that's why I'm trying to help you to understand it so that you don't get it mixed up. Okay? So this is not about the rapture. this part, all of that discourse is not about the rapture. And these I brought in. We won't talk about those. So the final Gentile kingdom is here. And this is the one that's going to come back. And this is going to be the Antichrist kingdom. Whatever king. And the other thing you have to remember, we would have to discuss Revelation to see it all. The Antichrist is going to have a kingdom, but there are going to be other kingdoms on the earth at that time. They're all going to be warring. So it's not like his is the only one, okay? There's other ones and they're warring. And I think at the end, he might win out, but at the beginning, there's a lot. I mean, that's why you had the horsemen of the apocalypse: war, famine, disease. Okay, all that's going to happen because there's going to be all these wars with him and all these other people. So you have to keep that in mind too. Oh, here it is. I did have it in here. There's the European Union of today. Okay, and there's the Roman Empire, the old Roman Empire. So the European Union is like from here, basically what we call Western Europe. Okay, about from here over, but not all of this, certainly, and not Africa. There's a lot of you could think about NATO. You know, is it NATO? Is it the EU? What is it? You know, I think America is going to pull out of NATO. So who knows? Now I found this chart, and hopefully this will help you. And I had one that I drew, but I didn't draw this one. Okay, somebody else did. So you have the rapture here, and then you have these 7 years where the Olivet Discourse is, and then you have the return of Christ and the establishing of the kingdom. That's why he said the gospel of the kingdom would be preached during those 7 years. And you have the first 3.5 years is the beginning, and the last 3.5 is the great tribulation, the time of great trouble. And right here in the middle, you have the desecration of the temple. So that means the temple has to be built before it can be desecrated, right? So when will we see the temple built? I don't know. But everything is ready for it. Okay, they have everything they need. They even have the plans. An architect has already drawn the plans. They have everything except that one little spot. That's what they don't have. Now, back in Matthew 24, this is his warning. Let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is in the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child. In other words, if they have children, or to them that give suck. In other words, you have little kids that are nursing. Because why? Because it's going to be very hard on those. And he says, pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. So now, what on earth is he talking about? Well, most people think that when the Antichrist does all this, that the Jewish people are going to have to flee once again out of the land. They're going to have to go somewhere because the Antichrist will be trying to kill them. And one theory, and I don't know, okay, I'm just giving you a theory, but one theory is that they're going here to Petra. Is it the hiding place for Israel during the tribulation? Petra is in Jordan, okay? But it's like a kingdom of stone. And it's here, and I got a map here.
Would Jordan allow the Jews to come there?
Well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to be happening at that time. But anyway, that is one of the big theories, is that they will go there. And Ralph Sexton, which maybe y'all have heard of him, and we went to hear him back in February. So he thinks that's where they're going. And one time he got 200 of the New Testaments, not from me, but this is when Jenny when Nancy Lowe was alive. And she also had Bibles, and she knew him very well. And she said he got 200 from her of my Bibles, New Testaments, and had them individually shrink wrapped and took them to Petra and hid them. Because he said when the Jewish people get there, he wants them to find the New Testament. And I said, oh, now I want to go to Petra and I want to find one. Okay, so that is my goal in life, is to go here and find where he hid them. Okay. And I've always wanted to go to Petra. Okay. And if y'all have ever watched Indiana Jones, that's where he was riding the horse and he went riding into Petra, you know. So that's where it's at. And then he says, for there shall be a great tribulation. This is the end. This is the last 3.5 years. Such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be again. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. And here the elect is talking about Israel. And they'll be shortened because they're going to stop at 3.5 years. They're not going to keep on going forever and ever. That's what he's saying. So that 3.5 years will be a very, very terrible time. So we don't want to be here, okay? We don't want to be here then. And then this is still Jesus talking, okay? I don't have it read, but all of this is him. If any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, you know, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere. He says, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs, false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, inasmuch as if it were possible they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I've told you before. And so I wrote this down here. All supernatural activity is not from God. There are also satanic forces at work. Do y'all remember when Moses went to Pharaoh and he started working the miracles? In the beginning, I think up to the first 2 plagues, the magicians recreated it, right? They could do it, but then they couldn't. They had to stop. But in the beginning, they could, and they were magicians. They were not, so they were using satanic activity. One of them was Jambres. Let's see, I think it's James that gave their names. But anyway, so not everything that's miraculous is from God. And as we approach toward the end times, we can see more and more supernatural activity, and we just have to remember it's not always from God. The Bible says, test the spirits and see whether it's from God. You know, you've seen these, that's usually on a newspaper while you're checking out, and there's a thing that says, you know, woman dies, goes to heaven, has lunch with Jesus, and comes back, you know, stuff like that. Okay, I don't know what she saw, but it wasn't the truth. And all those things are all very deceptive. Because when Paul really went to heaven and talked to Jesus and he came back, what did he say about it? Do you remember? I can't tell you. He said, it's too wonderful. I can't tell you anything that I saw. And that's what Paul said. So all these people that come back and write a book and a movie and all this, no, it's not the real thing. But it does deceive a lot of people. So we don't want to be deceived. We want to know the truth. He says, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, in other words, the Messiah, go not forth. Behold, he's in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now this is where they get the idea that Jesus is coming in the east, because he says the lightning comes out of the east and shines to the west. Now he's not saying that he's coming in the east. What is he saying there? He's saying that lightning, when it is in the sky, is over the whole sky, right? It'll shine from the east to the west. It just covers the whole sky. Have you ever stood out and watched a thunderstorm? And it just goes, and it's everywhere. What is he saying? When he comes, it's going to be instantaneous, and he's going to be everywhere, And everyone's going to know it. This is the second coming, not the rapture. He's saying, so if someone says, oh, he's down there or he's over there, no, when he comes in the second coming, the whole world will know it. And they'll know it instantaneously, just like you will know lightning is in the sky. That's all he's saying about the east and the west. When he comes here, we're all going to be with him. Okay, Christians, believers, the church is going to be with him. And we have to go to Revelation to get that, and we can't do that today. But we will be with him. Wheresoever the carcass is, there will be the eagles gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. The stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. This is mentioned greatly in the book of Revelation. All these signs in the heavens, okay, these many things that will be happening. And he says, then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man, and then shall the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds and for the end of heaven to the other. So this is the great gathering at the second coming, not the rapture. Okay, the rapture is in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, right? It happens. There's no signs. See all these signs? There's nothing like that for the rapture. We are supposed to be ready because it can happen at any moment. This is for the second coming. This is so that the people who are on earth, who are suffering through the great hardship of the tribulation, will know that the end is near and that their deliverance is near.
So that word elect, you said earlier the elect means Israel.
That's going to be Israel.
So then
Yes. Most people, now there's more than just Jewish people that get saved during the tribulation, but unfortunately, most people who are saved, you're going to be killed pretty quick. Because if you're saved and you won't take the mark of the beast, they're going to be killed. That's why there's all these tribulation saints. An innumerable number of people die during the tribulation who are born again. But when they get saved and they won't take that mark, then they're killed. But not everybody. There's some that are preserved, okay? And they will go into the millennial kingdom. In this body, in this fleshly, earthly body. And now he gives this little, I guess you'd call it parable. He says, learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. Now, did y'all know that the fig tree is pretty much the last one to bloom? The first tree to bloom in the spring is the almond tree. And the last one is a fig tree. So when the fig tree, he's like the cow's tail. When the fig tree finally blooms, it's like, okay, summer's here. Finally, the fig tree is blooming. That's what it means. Because he's the last one. So it's like Jesus saying, okay, when you see all this happening, it's like when we see the fig tree blooming, we say, okay, finally, summer is finally here. The fig tree is blooming. When they see, we're not going to see it, okay? When they see all this happening, they can say, okay, it's time for Jesus. It's time for the Messiah to come back. That's mainly what he's trying to say to them, okay? You shall know that all these things are near, even at the door. In other words, it's like if someone was at the door knocking, they're ready to come in, okay? He's saying, when you see all this happening, I'm ready to come. I'm coming to this earth. And then this phrase, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Now, people have taken this and made it mean like a million things. But mainly what he's saying is, when he says this generation, he's talking about the Jewish people. They shall not pass. In other words, they're not going to pass away off the earth. until all this happens. Remember, he's saying this 2,000 years ago. And think of all the persecution the Jewish people went through. But they're still here, right? He's saying they're always going to be here with us. They're not, they may be persecuted, they may be killed, many things may be happen, but they're still going to be here. Even all the way up to the end of the tribulation, there'll be Jewish people there. And then this, I just call this like a promise. Heaven and earth shall pass away. It will pass away one day, but his words will not ever pass away. His word is the one permanent thing that we can be guaranteed of. And then the final part here, I'm sorry, I forgot to make this big, so I can barely read it. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So he's saying, you can't set a date for the tribulation. Once it starts, then you can know, but you can't say, okay, in 5 years the tribulation will start. I think that's what he's trying to say. You can't know when it's going to start until it starts. So once it starts, you know it's going to last 7 years. But you just can't say when is it going to start, because it starts when the rapture happens, and we don't know the time for that. As the days of Noah, that's Noah. This is a Greek spelling. This is Noah and the ark. As the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, what were they doing? They were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. In other words, they were just doing normal stuff, right? Until the day Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, we're just going to be going along living our normal life. And then all of a sudden, everything changes. That's what he's trying to say. There's not a big sign for the rapture. And that's why in other parts of the Gospels, Jesus is saying, just be ready, be ready, be ready. Because there's really not a sign. We just have to be ready. Okay, and then I put this in here last week, and I put it back today. Okay. So what should we do? Because we're not going to be here in the tribulation. So we take a view of the rapture as occurring before the tribulation begins. Some people think that the rapture is going to happen in the middle of the tribulation, and some people don't believe in the rapture at all. I had a friend in England, and she worked for the Trinitarian Bible Society, and she said, "Oh, I don't believe in the rapture. Does that offend you?" And I said, "No, it doesn't offend me." I said, "Are you a Christian?" She said, "Yes." I said, "We are going anyway when it happens."